Android versus iOS. The war is over. Hey there, friends on YouTube. My name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for stopping by. If you want to come on back again, if you like the video, if you want more tech-related thoughts and reviews, then hit the like, subscribe, bell notification icon so you can do just that. You know, for years, the battle has raged on. Android versus iOS. Which is better? Which is cooler? Or whatever. But I'm here today to declare the war between the operating systems over today. Who won? Well, let's talk. I thought this would be a good time to stop in for a little reality check because the second part of the smartphone season is about to kick off in a big way with the unveiling of the Note 10 next week in Brooklyn, New York. I've been thinking a lot about why the smartphone has captured people's interest for more than a decade. I understand why smartphones were such a big deal in the early years. With each new phone, we got better performance, sometimes by leaps and bounds. We got better features, new technologies. Each year from, say, 2007 until maybe 2015, smartphones were the bleeding edge of technology, and their capabilities year after year were really kind of astounding. We made the leap from clunky, mostly underperforming laptops for mobile computing to an ever-slimming slab of glass and metal that could potentially make laptops obsolete. And the wonders these phones could perform just grew until they didn't anymore. If you're a geek like me, you remember when the first iPhone was released. Well, if you're old enough to remember that, Apple had been rumored to have this phone in the works for a while, but no one really knew what it would be. Most people thought maybe it would be something that took the features of an iPod and paired it with a mobile device, kind of maybe similar to the clamshell type devices of the day or something like that. Nobody really knew. What we got in the first OG iPhone was something totally unexpected. So much so that Google actually scrapped their first build of Android, and the release of the first Android phone went back to the lab and started over. No one had successfully cracked the phone media productivity code until the iPhone. I'm not saying the iPhone was the first smartphone. I'm not saying it's the best smartphone. But from the very early stages, it took the idea of smartphone and implemented it in a way that just worked. It was intuitive. It was simple. The UI made sense. And believe me, though there were earlier examples, none of them had the polish of even the first iPhone. And that wasn't really very polished to begin with. You have to remember that the kings of the mobile phone market back in 2007 and before were companies like BlackBerry, Motorola with the Razr, Nokia with their little candy bar phone, Palm with the Treo, and other stuff like that. They each had their own claims to fame, but as time went on and the gap between them really started to close, the phones started to kind of look the same, do basically the same things. BlackBerry was the business person's phone. The Moto Razr was everyone else's phone. The Palm Treo was in there doing its thing. You get the idea. But the iPhone announced the beginning of a new era for the phone. It was now going to be a do-everything computer in your pocket based on the whole idea of 1,000 songs in your pocket that was realized with the iPod. Fast forward a few years and Android OS had established itself as a competitor for iOS, but in the early years, Android had a rough go of it in terms of stability, reliability, in part because the software was open source and it had to be adopted and adapted to many different hardware iterations, and manufacturers putting their own skins on. Trust me. I remember having phones like the Samsung Captivate, the Motorola Atrix, and while they were really interesting, great devices, they really couldn't keep pace with their promise. But Android did mature, and because of its open source nature, it began to outstrip iOS in features, and the hardware was typically more affordable. Now we find ourselves in 2019 at a really interesting place. And it's a familiar place as smartphones compare to mobile phones that preceded them. The arms war over features between iOS and Android ended a few years ago. I guess I'd point to Android Lollipop or somewhere around there as the moment when Android had matured enough to truly gain parity with the iPhone. And maybe that's where the two roads converged and led us to this moment, where whether it's an Android phone or an iPhone, there is very little that separates the two in terms of features, reliability, design, etc., etc., etc. For the past 3+ years, basically all of the flagship phones have been two slabs of glass held together by a metal frame. If you take Marques Brownlee's 5 pillars of a great smartphone, design, display, performance, camera, battery, then look at today's phones, there's very little space between any flagship phone from a major brand, Apple, Samsung, Huawei, OnePlus, and all the others. They all score high marks in each of those benchmarks, and they have been there for a few years now. Yes, there is personal choice that separates the phones for one individual versus another, but as products, they are nearly identical in what they offer. And while Android phones used to be a pretty good value compared to the pricey iPhone, all major manufacturers now release phones that cost in the range of $1,000 and up. The truth of the matter is, there's very little that differentiates the flagship phones of today. Samsung doesn't offer some kind of killer feature over not OnePlus because they don't have wireless charging, but you know what I mean. Samsung doesn't have a killer feature versus other Android phones. The iPhone isn't the slam dunk better choice for highest quality device that you can buy. All the devices are built to a really high level of specifications. Other than the biggest differentiating factor, the two operating systems, and really, let's be honest, the two operating systems is a matter of choice. It's personal taste. And these days, in terms of functionality, it doesn't matter what side you sit on. Every phone on the market is basically the same, offering the same features for the same prices. And so what used to seem like making a choice and getting something more personal to you, what used to be picking a side and rooting for the home team, is really pointless now. Line up a OnePlus 7 Pro, a Galaxy S10 Plus, an iPhone XS Max, and a Huawei P30 Pro, and tell me if you can see a cosmetic difference significant enough to really pick one of those phones design-wise over another. These phones all look the same, and they all function the same. So what happens when a product reaches parity and there's little difference between one model to the next? It becomes a commodity unless some kind of sweeping change comes in and changes the game all over again, like Samsung hopes the folding phone does. According to Wikipedia, a commodity is an economic good or service that has full or substantial fungibility. That is, the market treats instances of this good as equivalent or nearly so, with no regard to who produced them. The wide availability of commodities typically leads to smaller profit margins and diminishes the importance of the factors such as brand name, other than price. Smartphones right now have reached that point of being a commodity. What we're seeing now with the huge price premiums of $1,000 phones, etc., is the last gasp, the last grab for cash in a dying market. Soon the flagship phone will diminish in importance. And really, we just don't realize that it already has. As the mid-range phones become more competitive in terms of performance and features, the bottom will drop out, and the day of the $1,000 phone will end. It will no longer matter so much who makes the phone, so much as what the price to performance value is for the customer. Apple, Samsung, all the manufacturers know this. That's why we see Apple turning hard towards selling services, and other companies will look for their profits in other areas as well over the next 3 to 5 years. So who won the war of the operating system? No one. But I know who lost. The consumer, at least up until now. Both operating systems, while fundamentally different in their mindset about how to do what they do, are functionally the same in how they do what they do and how fast they can do it or how effectively. The smartphone is just right here on the precipice of becoming a commodity where every phone is basically the same. Over the next few years, we'll see the prices slowly start to even out and eventually drop. The rush to get the newest, the latest, the greatest will start to subside, like any kind of fad really does. The smartphone has been a fad up to this point, and it will become what it's always been, just a phone. And what the heck will I rant about then? Thanks so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. If this was your first time here and you want to come on back again, then like, subscribe, bell notify yourself, and join the Painfully Honest Tech Wizard Squad. And if you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back again. It really does mean the world to me so much. Anyway, Once again, my name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. Until the next time, I'm out.